Hello, this is Logue Elder, and this is another installment of Let's Talk Consciousness. Um, there's something that I've wrestled with that I'm not sure if it's not even a cause worth taking up, or if it's something that maybe is just too daunting that I wouldn't even want to try it. But I've heard it expressed that the diet of things that you take into your mind in terms of media, um, whatever media that may take the form of, movies, video games, television, news, of whatever variety, that the idea that you might actually benefit from being conscientious about what you put in your mind just as much as you would be about what you put in your body. That being said, I know a lot of people, myself included, are not really mastering the whole what you put in your body thing. So, admittedly, that's not the best example, but it is an idea that I've played with, and there are certain ways that that has kind of come to resonate with me. But the reason I'm thinking of it is this is right now the premiere of Game of Thrones season 7, and I'm not watching it. Not necessarily intentionally. It just kind of came about that as it was playing, and my wife and some friends were over watching it, and um, it there's I think a certain liberation in not being chained to that. But I've totally skipped past why, so I guess I'm kind of going out of order. But the reason why is that something that's like incredibly violent, or where the sort of narrative of that story is malevolent, even if it's involving characters that transcend some sort of violent conflict, or whatever it is, that it's like even traveling into that world where this kind of violence is like, I mean, violence happens here too, so that's not the best example, but I just mean that like you're going into this atmosphere where like there's a real heavy presence of violence, that could, your takeaway from that on a subconscious level may be that you live in a world where there's lots of violence, that it's waiting for you around every corner. And I think that's the thing that may be worth taking a moment of pause to think about. And um, admittedly, it's not easy to even suggest doing, because there's so many TV shows that I wouldn't want to necessarily stop watching. I mean, Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead. There's no point in listing them. It just goes on. Game of Thrones being one of them. I really enjoy Game of Thrones, but my point is, um, it's uh, it, it's a strange idea because it's so far removed from what we consider to be like a thing you'd even look out for. I don't think people really look at their diet of TV, or whatever it is, and think that there's even anything wrong with watching violence, that it may inform your outlook on real life. Um, I would say the example that I could think of that's actually, it's not violence, but it's a different example that I really can feel its impression on me, is actually sitcoms and comedy movies, but comedy, for some reason, comedy writing. I'll expand in just a second. Um, Comedy writing is usually predicated on somebody being humiliated. Not always. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it that don't involve that, but it seems like that's kind of the low hanging fruit. So, sitcoms, I would say most comedy movies that are popular enough to make it into theaters, but not limited to that. Um, it seems like one character or another, even the character that's like the main character or the sympathetic character, will still at one point or another go through some humiliating experience. For me personally, I think that struck a bigger chord than violence, in terms of like something that I was afraid of, because I didn't really grow up in a setting that included much violence. I had a pretty peaceful childhood, but I did experience a lot in the way of running up against being humiliated, or like I've mentioned, now this will be the third video I've brought it up, being overweight as a kid. Um, but I think it applies to any childhood. Like you're going to be, at some point or another, you're going to be humiliated by something. And so watching TV shows where the humor is predicated on that, to me, I can tell as an adult where I find myself in a situation that kind of resembles a sitcom premise. And it's like, even though I don't expect it to happen, I'm kind of reflexively a little bit anxious about like a laugh track that's never gonna, I'm never gonna hear, but like just being the butt of a joke, basically. Like sometimes that fear pops into my head when it really has no reason to. It's because I've watched, or I'm saying, my premise here is that it's because I've watched so many TV shows where that is the thing, that's the reality that they live in, and you watch that. And by the way, we've only had TV for, so many decades, since, I mean, in the earliest forms, 1940s, I think. So it's like we haven't really come to understand how it affects our mind. And I'm not saying no TV and no violent TV, but at least thinking twice about what it is and what it does to you, and maybe just considering what it might be like to withdraw from it. And that's the thing I've experimented, just letting go of my attachment to TV shows. And I haven't completely gotten rid of them, but I'm now at the point where I don't feel like if I miss one, it's not a big deal. Like, some shows that have been away for a few years and they're coming back, and when they come back, it's like I'm already kind of coming around to this idea, so it's like I'm not as anxious to see what's next on this particular season. So I don't have a lot of length to go into about that, other than it's expressed in various forms. I think New Age kind of thinking is probably where you'd find it the most. The idea that watching, um, violent, negative programming is kind of, in a sense, programming you. I realize you could turn that to music, and I'm wearing a Megadeth shirt and sitting in front of a Misfits poster. I probably blocked that in every single video that I've ever done. But if you couldn't tell, it's Misfits. So it's like, I haven't completely figured that out. Actually, I will say there are times when I can tell that like negative music is kind of like, it's almost like drinking a lot of coffee. Like there's this kind of energetic buzz to it that I think years past I would not even have noticed. And as I've gotten older and been more conscious of my mood and how things affect my mood, I think that there is a relationship between loud music and having kind of a tense mood. That being said, some of it can be very, I want to say, like victorious, or like kind of in its own way uplifting. The example that comes to mind, even though it's just kind of a random one, is like the Devin Townsend band, or Devin Townsend project, or Strapping Young Lad. Very, very heavy, but there are moments of it being very uplifting and kind of operatic. And I don't know, I guess you could find your own exceptions in that, but I really don't have a conclusion other than, if it strikes you as all as it, if it strikes you at all as being beneficial, give a try to withdrawing from negative entertainment. Just catch all entertainment, and maybe find yourself reading, watching, consuming more like documentaries. And I know that's kind of an easy cliche thing to say, like that's superior programming if you're pretentious and intellectual. I'm just saying something that's like based on real life. It doesn't have to be a serious documentary. There's lots of fun documentaries about King of Kong, or Netflix documentary about people competing at high scores on Donkey Kong. There's plenty out there to uplift you, so think about your diet of uplifting or negative content. See what happens.